What's up, psychedelic investors? My name's James, and you're watching The Psychedelic Investor, your number one news source for psychedelic stocks. In today's episode, we're just going to do a little bit of catch-up. We're going to look at some of the events that have happened over the past few weeks that we haven't had time to look at on this channel. So we're going to be talking about a new study that Compass Pathways released. We're going to talk about how Field Trip has been uplisted to a major exchange, and we're going to talk about some new studies that have been published by some smaller companies. If you're looking for MindMed stuff, don't worry, we published an episode on that yesterday about all the updates that they've had over the past few weeks, so you can go check that out when you're done with this episode. If you enjoy this episode, make sure you like and subscribe to support the channel and ring that notifications bell to make sure you never miss an episode. Enjoy the video. Two of the core questions that needs to be answered before society accepts psilocybin-assisted psychotherapy are: 1. Is psilocybin safe to take? And 2. Will it affect my cognitive functions going forward in the future? Well, it just so happens that these are the two questions that Compass Pathways, ticker symbol CMPS on the Nasdaq exchange, aims to answer. The company recently published study results on the safety and cognitive effects of taking a dose of psilocybin. The Phase 1 trial was actually completed in 2019, and some results were presented at the time. However, the company has now released what they call a quote-unquote more in-depth analysis of cognitive data. The main purpose of the study was to measure the cognitive effects of taking psilocybin in healthy individuals. The placebo-controlled trial saw 89 participants being given one dose of either 10 milligrams or 25 milligrams of psilocybin or a placebo. It's important to note here that the psilocybin being used was actually Compass's proprietary formula, COMP360. To measure the cognitive ability, all the participants were given a cognitive test called the CAN-TAB 1 day before the dose of psilocybin was administered, then a week after it was administered, and finally 4 weeks after the dose was given. The key takeaway of this study was, quote, that single doses of COMP360 do not exert clinically relevant negative effects in healthy volunteers on the cognitive functions assessed. Interestingly, cognitive ability may have increased after the dose of psilocybin. However, that may just be due to the placebo effect, since those in the placebo group also saw an increase in their cognitive scores a week and 4 weeks after psilocybin was given. Either way, the main purpose of the Phase 1 study was to assess the cognitive safety of taking COMP360, which appears to have been verified. This was a small study, so obviously we're going to need to see much more data on this going forward on a much larger scale. But honestly, guys, it wasn't exactly an unexpected result. We are already fairly certain that psilocybin is safe to take. So following up this study, I personally would like to see one on looking at the cognitive ability over time of people who take lots of psilocybin, maybe take psilocybin once a month or twice a month for a year, something like that. And this would just be interesting to me to see if large doses of psilocybin over a large amount of time would affect cognitive abilities or not. And yeah, I would just like to see a study like that going forward. So what do you guys think? Is psilocybin 100% safe to take, or do you think that we need more study on this topic before we start prescribing it to many individuals? Let me know down in the comments. How do we measure the effects and intensity of psychedelic experiences? Sure, we could have a study where participants fill out questionnaires, but that will be skewed by personal biases. For example, two people experiencing the exact same thing may describe it in two very different ways, or they may describe it in different severities. Alternatively, we can have a fMRI scanning device. Sure, this will get us a brain scan, but we are limited by the expense of such a huge machine. These massive machines are very expensive and not necessarily available to researchers studying psychedelics when they need them. What if, instead, we could have a transportable, wearable helmet that completes the brain scan? And while this may sound like science fiction, it's exactly what Cybin, ticker symbol CYBN on the NEO exchange, and CLXPF on the OTC, is working on through a partnership with a company called Kernel. Kernel is a company which has developed a helmet that uses neuroimaging technology to measure brain activity in real time. It's called the, quote, Kernel Flow device, and the helmet uses pulsing lights that is shot into the brain, and then when some of that light makes its way back up to the helmet, it can create an image of your brain activity. While this helmet tech will have lots of applications in the future, one of its first real-world tests will be to study the effects of ketamine on the brain. Specifically, the helmet will be measuring how blood flows in the cerebral cortex while a patient is on ketamine. This is interesting because the cerebral cortex is the part of the brain that's thought to be central to consciousness and how we experience the world. For example, it's the part of the brain that is responsible for sensation, perception, memory, association, thought, and voluntary physical action. And these are all pieces of the puzzle that are essential to understanding both psychedelic experiences and consciousness itself. So, if we begin to have an understanding of how ketamine and other psychedelics change the blood flow, we may get a better idea of how exactly psychedelics affect the brain in the first place. Eventually, Cybin and Kernel will use this helmet in clinical trials and other studies, but for now, the agreement is more limited. Cybin is sponsoring a feasibility study of this helmet measuring the psychedelic effects of ketamine on the blood flow of the cerebral cortex. I hope this works well, and I hope that we see this helmet technology expand across healthcare. If for no other reason than I am a futurist, and this seems really cool to me, guys. I wanna have this in the future that I live in. So I don't know if this has any chance in hell of working or not, and I guess Cybin doesn't either, and that's why they're only sponsoring a feasibility study, but we're just gonna have to wait and see. In order to fully grasp the risks and benefits of psychedelic medicines, we need to further understand how they interact with the brain. And this is what Cybin and Kernel seem to be attempting to figure out here. So major props to both of these companies. I wish them best. I hope this feasibility study goes well. We here at the Psychedelic Investor are going to be keeping an eye on this going forward and bringing you any new updates as they happen. Now, it's your turn. Do you think a helmet measuring the blood flow in the brain can really unlock the secrets of psychedelics? Or do you think this is just a cool technology project looking for a purpose? Let me know down in the comments. As psychedelic medicines companies continue to attract capital and perform groundbreaking studies, we should expect to see more and more of them be uplisted to prestigious exchanges. We saw this originally with MindMed, and now we're seeing this with Field Trip Health, ticker symbol FTRPF on the OTC market and FTRP on now the TSX exchange. Now, there are actually two stories here that I want to share with you. First, regarding the TSX in Canada, and second, the Nasdaq in the United States. Starting here in my home and native land of Canada, as of June 7th, the company has been uplisted from the CSE, which is kind of like our version of the OTC exchange, to the TSX, the Toronto Stock Exchange, which is like our Nasdaq market. Now, this has already happened, but in case you haven't heard about this and you personally hold the Canadian ticker of Field Trip, then don't worry about this. You don't have to do anything. If you hold FTRP on the CSE, your stock was automatically switched to the TSX. There's no change for you. You don't have to worry. Everything is good. Moving over to the implications of this for the company itself, this is very good news for Field Trip. It shows that institutional investors and financial regulators here in Canada see the potential for Field Trip, and they've judged that its risk profile has decreased significantly. This should give it easier access to capital and perhaps lure in investors who don't necessarily invest in small biomedical companies that are on the CSE because of their risk profile, but who are willing to invest a little bit into the TSX, even if they're biomedical companies. So, while I was actually writing the script for this episode here, news broke that Field Trip has also applied to be uplisted to the Nasdaq exchange in the United States, and that is, of course, from the OTC market where they currently are. And upon the first glance of the regulations in order to be uplisted, such as a price target of $3, Field Trip appears to meet all the different criteria. However, that doesn't necessarily guarantee that they will be successful in being uplisted, as it will ultimately be left up to a board to decide. Remember, it took MindMed more than half a year to uplist, I believe, so I wouldn't necessarily expect this to happen anytime soon. But if they are accepted, then the benefits of this would be similar to their being uplisted to the TSX, but greater since America is almost 10 times the size of Canada. Either way, just being on the TSX is a huge deal. It's still one of the world's most premier stock exchanges, and it will allow them to be included into ETFs that only allow stocks from prestigious exchanges. For example, the Advisor Shares Psychedelic ETF, PSIL, which should be going live sometime in the near future. I don't have an exact date, but it should be going live sometime soon. That ETF is only going to allow companies that are on markets like the Nasdaq, like the New York Stock Exchange, and like, crucially, the TSX. So this field trip uplisting is their ticket into that ETF. Now, just being on the TSX and then maybe soon the Nasdaq doesn't really change the calculus of whether or not field trip will be a good long-term investment. That will rely only on how well their scientific endeavors go and then eventually whether or not they can commercialize them. Despite this is a really big boost of confidence for the company. It is a real milestone that field trip has just passed here, getting accepted onto the TSX. So a major props to the team. And just full disclosure, at the moment I don't own any field trip stock, but that could change in the near future. I am actively considering whether or not I should put in a little opening position into the company, but I haven't made up my mind yet, and I of course will let you guys know the second that I decide whether or not to invest in this company. So what do you guys think? Is field trip a good investment? Does them being uplisted onto the TSX and then perhaps the Nasdaq make it more likely that you personally will invest in the company? Let me know down in the comments. Oh, and one last thing, Field Trip Health isn't actually the only psychedelic medicines company that has recently applied to be uplisted to the Nasdaq exchange. There's also a company that's called Pharma, which is SILO on the OTC market. They have also put in an application to be uplisted to the Nasdaq exchange. I haven't actually talked about this company too much on the channel before, or perhaps ever on the channel. I'm not sure, maybe I mentioned them once or twice, but they are also a development stage pharmaceutical company working with substances like MDMA, psilocybin, LSD, etc. And I don't actually know too much about the company at this moment, just because I don't believe they really have any clinical trials at this moment, so I haven't really done too much research into them. But if you guys are invested into Silo, let me know down in the comments, and if there's interest into what this company is doing, if they're not doing clinical trials, then let me know down in the comments. And if there's enough people that want to know more about this company, then I'll do some research and I'll make a video for you guys. Being uplisted to the Nasdaq isn't the only way for a company to get on the prestigious market, however. There's also a sneaky backdoor way, by being acquired by a company that's already on the exchange. And that is exactly what happened with MagicMed, a tiny Alberta-based psychedelic medicines company that was acquired by Enveric Biosciences, ticker symbol ENVB. Now, MagicMed, for those that might not have heard of it before, is a company that's using artificial intelligence platforms that they call PsyAI to create a brand new psychedelic never seen before by humans. So far, the company says that they have mapped around 125 million potential new analogs of drugs like psilocybin and DMT, and this makes up their Cybrary. Gotta give it to them, they're killing it with the puns. So the company is working on getting patents for some of these more promising analogs, but no patent has yet to be granted. MagicMed, of course, has been a dark horse candidate of mine for who will win the psychedelic medicines race, and that is because their AI technology, from the outside at least, seems very promising. They are just a tiny private company, so I've only mentioned them a couple times on this channel, but I have been keeping an eye on them. And to be clear, I have zero idea if their technology platforms are going to work out or not, but having advanced artificial intelligence creating our human medicines by crunching infinite amounts of data and looking for patterns that humans would never see is one of the trends that's going to absolutely take over the entire healthcare industry writ large over the next couple decades. So we need to be on top of that trend going forward, and there's no guarantee that MagicMed is going to be one of the companies that breaks this code, but they're interesting nevertheless. Just the fact that they're trying to do this makes them worthy of keeping an eye on. The company that acquired MagicMed, Enveric Biosciences, is itself a tiny company. Their market cap sits around $55 million. So, if they want to become a major competitor in this space, they're going to need to get that market cap up and raise lots and lots of cash, lots of moolah. So as for what Enveric Biosciences does, they're actually a biotech company working to improve the lives of cancer patients using a variety of different cannabinoids. So acquiring MagicMed's artificial intelligence technology does seem to be a good fit for this company. As for the direction of this newly merged company, It appears like they're going to be going more in MagicMed's direction than Enveric's direction, and that's because the CEO of MagicMed is now set to become the CEO of Enveric. So with this transaction, there are now 3 publicly listed companies, psychedelic medicines companies, which are on the Nasdaq exchange. They are Quantum, MindMed, Compass Pathways, and Enveric. So congratulations to everybody on the team of Enveric and MagicMed. I am so excited to see all of your progress going forward. How do we measure progress in the psychedelic medicine sphere? Well, the obvious answer is to look at the successes of the clinical trials, as we do on this channel all the time. And while that is true, it's not necessarily the only metric to look at. Another one is the growing size and capabilities a company has to manufacture and study psychedelics. And it is in that lens that we should view this next story. That Health Canada has approved the expansion of Mydecine's cultivation capabilities for psilocybin-producing mushrooms. Mydecine, by the way, has a ticker symbol MYCOF on the American OTC market and MYCO on the Canadian NEO market. So with this approval, the company will begin construction of its expanded cultivation facilities in an effort to scale up its supply of pharmaceutical-grade psilocybin, both for internal clinical research and also for its industry partners. The company says that this increased cultivation will also allow them to more efficiently and effectively and quickly study the medical utility of naturally occurring psilocybin and psilocybin-like compounds. So this is obviously great news, though the one caveat I would have is that I couldn't find by how much they're actually increasing their production capacity. Are they doubling it? Tripling it? It's only increasing by 5%, isn't it? 10%. Obviously, the variations between these would affect greatly how positively I see this development, but regardless, no matter by how much they are increasing their footprint, it's obviously good news. There are now many companies out there in the field, such as Haven and Numinous, that are producing their own natural psilocybin as compared to synthetic psilocybin like Compass is doing. Though I don't necessarily think that they're going to come into competition or direct competition with each other in any time in the near future, particularly if psilocybin starts being used by the mainstream medical establishment. The market is just so large that it can accommodate having multiple different players creating their own psilocybin, be it synthetic or be it natural. So this is just great news for Mydecine. We're going to have to look at this going forward, see how it develops, but yeah, great news for Mydecine. Ibogaine has been shown to be potentially useful in treating addiction. However, there is one issue that we haven't talked about on this channel before with the use of Ibogaine, and that is that the Iboga plant from which the drug comes is endangered. Luckily, MINDCURE, MCUR on the CSE, and MCURF on the OTC market has a solution. The company recently announced that they have successfully completed the first stage of manufacturing synthetic Ibogaine for use in psychedelic clinical research settings. So this could allow them to become a supplier for any institution wanting to conduct trials on this drug for, say, addiction or any other issue such as Parkinson's or Alzheimer's. So mad props to MindCure for creating this synthetic Ibogaine. Hopefully it will be very useful in the near future. That's all for today, folks. I hope you enjoyed the episode. If you did, don't forget to like and subscribe and comment down below what you think about any of these topics. All this type of engagement really does help keep the channel alive going forward. Also, keep in mind, I am not a financial advisor. Anything I said in this was just my own opinion, and you should not use that to base your own financial decisions off of. Guys, I love you all so much for your continued support. If you want to see some more videos, click on some of the videos you see on your screen now. And if you don't, then just hit that notifications bell, and when our next video drops, you will be the first to know. Peace, guys. I love you.